Hello everyone, and welcome back to Reviews with Tyberius D. I was going to do this the other day, but I decided against it. I'm actually doing this right before the Mascot podcast because I was bum tired. And if you watch my geopolitics episode on Chicago, you can definitely tell I was about brain dead. And I didn't want to do this show in that regard because I can do geopolitics in my sleep, but reviews, getting in touch with my inner self and actually giving my hard takes on that's a little bit harder. I have to emotionally and intellectually be available. And so yeah, I wanted to give that to you guys when it was a little bit of our time. Today, we're going to be doing the Ace Combat series. And by the way, the intro is coming. My editor is now working on that. So usually I'd be like, hey, we're reviewing Ace Combat. Roll the intro. That is coming. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about Ace Combat, which is a video game series. And yes, I do video games, and I've been looking to do this for a while. Thinking about maybe doing music at some point. Haven't gotten to that point. Haven't decided on that one because copyright's a bitch. But at least in this general level is that like video game series are definitely on board. Movies are definitely on board. Basically any kind of entertainment that I can literally just sit there and rant about is open. And so if you have any requests, like we had the one for Jexy, definitely contact me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or even messages on Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram. All of these are available for you. But anyway, without further ado, we're going to get started with it. I'm going to kill the intros for a moment and get into this. Ace Combat is a video game series spanning all the way back to 1995, and maybe even earlier with the early arcade games. There's a bit of a controversy around that, about how far this actually really does go back. But the original release, Air Combat, back in 1995. I haven't played it, but you've probably played a lot of games that are like that. You have the originally like the old air shooters that were top-down views. If you played any of those, you kind of get the idea of how that originally worked. But then you have Air Combat, which was the first technically 3D, or one of the first 3D simulators that you had. And simulators are a little over the top. It's an arcade game, right? But on top of that is that it was one of the first 3D. And while it didn't actually have 3D models in Air Combat, it had a 3D flying landscape like what we saw with the immersed like flight simulators. Is that it was very low texture, but you could fly around like you were actually flying a jet. Now, a lot of those were largely in the arcades, but what we did see is Air Combat originally was released, and we call it Air Combat here, Ace Combat over in Japan, but it was originally released for the, what was that? The PlayStation 1, way back in 1995. And so, yeah, good times had all around. And so, yeah, I didn't get a chance to play it, but there's a lot of games that are kind of like that, and you kind of get the whole general look at it as you go. But we're going to skip around for the first couple ones, just because of the fact that they're kind of dated, they're kind of old, and they didn't have much of what we would typically associate with as Ace Combat. So, rolling up to 1997, you have Ace Combat 2. Big O Ace Combat 2. Going on. And, excuse me, I forgot to write my notes down for this, but, yeah, anyway. Sorry about that. Anyway, I just need to make sure of this. 1997, you have the release of Ace Combat 2. Largely a successor, but it's seen as a lot better. A lot of the problems that people had with Ace Combat 1 for the day is basically made up for in Ace Combat 2. And it's starting to look like what we think of. But the big thing is that it doesn't really have a story. It's largely just, what was it, like 12, 18 missions, something like that. Go around, you blow stuff up. Good times had all around, but not necessarily that amazing as far as what we would normally would think of. However, there is a catch here. Ace Combat Assault Horizon Legacy, which was released in 2011, is a misleading name. This is actually Ace Combat 2 remade for, I believe it's for handheld devices like PSP. I did not get a chance to play it, but I hear it was actually very good and brings Ace Combat 2 basically into the Strange Real world in a far more constructive manner. And so I haven't played it, but I hear good things. But again, Ace Combat 2. And I'm doing a lot. Damn. Excuse me. Anyway, Ace Combat 2 wasn't bad, getting there, but I don't really consider the modern series to start until Ace Combat 3, which will start right now. It's 1999, and Ace Combat 3 is released on the PlayStation 1. Now, I didn't get a chance to play this one. I didn't get to play it a lot. I need to stop that. Released in January 21st of 2000 here in the States, or May 27th in 1999 for Japan, is that we got Electrosphere. And it's got a killer title. Unfortunately, here in North America and even in Europe, is that this game wasn't what it really should have been. We got the watered down version. And it's not the mechanics were bad. The mechanics were the exact same. And you got most of the missions. I think you got 18 out of the 30. You got 18 out of the 30 that you actually had. But unfortunately, the Japanese release got the full suite. It was a 2-disc complete box release, had a massive storyline, had so many extra missions and multiple endings and all this other kind of thing. And it was one of the most expansive video game releases that we've seen in quite a long while. Of course, that was back in the PS1 days when you had 4-disc collects like The Legend of Dragoon and whatnot. And you had, I think, one of the Spyro games was a couple of discs themselves. So, good times had back then, but unfortunately, just with the limitations of what was going on, is that they maxed this thing out, and they had to put it on 2 discs. But unfortunately, they just didn't translate that over to the North American and European audiences, and this game really does suffer for it. This would be a cult classic if it had the original full suite available for North America and EU consumption, and I think it would really have put Ace Combat on the map a few years earlier than what it actually would have. But soon, very soon, we'll be getting into the golden age of Ace Combat, and that'll pretty much just start now. I'm going to forget the notes. We'll just do this later as far as the thumbnails. I look, oh, by the way, I noticed if you're watching my stuff, I am trying to get the bookmarks down below in the scribe bar, so you can just be like, hey, if I forget or I'm watching this piece by piece, you can be able to jump. I'm still backlogged on that. That's really hard to do once you kind of start it. I was trying to do some notes for this one, but it's really hard to do 2 things at once, and so I need my team back. My team's still kind of falling apart here. We're working on getting it better. But anyway, Electrosphere was a wonderful game, especially in the Japanese release from everything that I've been told. I did play the English version. It wasn't bad. But yeah, it didn't have the full release package that I think would have pushed it over the edge and made it a wonderful game that would have put Ace Combat on the map 2 to 3 years earlier than it actually came into. But now, we're in the golden age. It is the rise of the PS2 era, and in 2001, we get Ace Combat 4, Shattered Skies, or Distant Thunder over in Europe. It's unfortunate that we'll have different names for the Europeans across the board here. But, yeah, fun times. I need to stop doing I'm working on it. I don't know. It's just a tick. Anyway. September 13th, 2001 in Japan. November 1st, 2001 in the United States, or in North America. And February 8th, 2002 for the Europeans. This game puts Ace Combat on the map for a lot of people. It's not what we see with like Ace Combat 0 and Ace Combat 5, but it's definitely starting to show itself. It's got a functional storyline, a wonderful narrative. Its mechanics are really solid. We're coming out with special weapons, and the fact that you can just drop bombs and cherry blossoms and all kinds of wonderful things on people. It was a wonderful game, and it was my original introduction to the Ace Combat series, given to me by a wonderful friend, or family friend, that we still have. I didn't know anything about this game. I just was like, hey, here's a birthday present. I believe it was a birthday present. Could have been a Christmas present. I think this one was a Christmas present. Anyway, I think it was a Christmas present back in the winter of 2001, and I was addicted to this game. All of a sudden, I jump in there, and I'm like, oh, I'm flying a jet around. And this is just a couple years, actually, after I had been in the F-16 Thunderbird simulator. And that really kind of got my love for aviation going and started, to where I could do this at home, and it was cool. Or no, I'm sorry. This would be right before that, because I played Ace Combat, and I was hoping the simulator would be a lot like that. Really wasn't. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, Ace Combat 4, absolutely fun game. Wonderful story, wonderful mechanics. A little underwhelming now, but in a general sense, is what back for 2001 on the PS2, this was a wonderful game. Absolutely blew the socks off a lot of people and put Ace Combat on the map. Now, unfortunately, as a AAA title, it doesn't get the name recognition that I think it deserves. But, some people just have an issue with flying things in 3 dimensions. They have enough... I mean, if you guys look at drivers on the road today, they have enough trouble with 2 dimensions and just going right, left, and forward and backwards. Put up and down into that, and we're going to have crashes all over the place. But if you can understand a 3D landscape and actually fly a plane and do all that understanding, this game is absolutely wonderful. It was fun. Just as a general plot detail, you play one of the most popular characters in the series, which is the nameless protagonist of Mobius 1. And you go about and you basically try to end the First Yuzian War. Now, to kind of explain what's going on here, is that this is established... What is this shit? Alright, I'm going to have to break out the mod view and I'm going to start hitting people for being jackasses. Anyway, First Yuzian War goes off, and you play as the nameless protagonist who is going about and trying to stop that. Your antagonist is part of the main storyboard, Yellow 13. He is a good character. He is not a villain. He is not a bad guy. He's an antagonist. He has his own side. He has his own personal motives that are completely understandable and are wonderful to do. And it's told by the story of a guy who's reflecting back on the war in his meeting of the Yellow Squadron, Yellow 13. And so you kind of get the viewpoint of the war through the recollections of somebody who was at the time young and got to know the people that you were fighting against. And it was quite a wonderful story. It does set the tone for Ace Combat being a little over the top, especially that last mission where you go against Megalith, but Stonehenge was cool. Stonehenge was really cool. And so we'll definitely see this going forward. Excuse me. We'll see this going forward, definitely as a lot of fun, is that Ace Combat will set the tone for having a really good storyline, or at least pretty good storyline, and being a little over the top when it comes to like super weapons and fantasy and whatnot. It's good times. And Sherm, good to see you. Any of you played it? Killed Stonehenge. Congratulations, sir. Just played it today. Fantastic. A lot of people have been going back and actually replaying them because some people got into like Ace Combat 7 because it had a huge marketing budget, and have been going out to play the older games. And unfortunately, the older games are better, particularly the Golden Age, which we're talking about right now. Anyway, to close out on Ace Combat 4, already got 5 done. Cool. Anyway, to close on 4, the problem with the stories are they're largely nameless protagonists, and with nameless protagonists that you don't get a personal story for your character, which is fine because you can insert yourself in. It's largely done by what you're doing or what your opponents are doing in their story. Now, we'll divorce this with Ace Combat 5, but we're not there yet. But the story's wonderful, and it really cements the world building that Strange Reel will have, and particularly the Yuzian continent with the crash of the Ulysses asteroid, and basically their whole world going to hell. Just to kind of set this world up for anyone who is watching, and you know what? I can actually do this on my end, because this is not a podcast, is we can... I can show you things. I can show you things on the wonderful, wonderful internets using all this. And so, pop this out real quick. I'm going to use the right display. Here you go. There you go. Yeah. So, this is a Strange Real World. You'll notice some geography that's very, very different than our own, but on a few levels is that you can probably see a few things that look familiar. The Great Lakes right here, or the Great Lakes, for example, are right here, and Wellow is basically Greenland. Some of this is just basically copy-paste, but in in Ace Combat 4 and Ace Combat 3, you fight over Yuzia, and you do see the map of Yuzia in Ace Combat 3, but you really don't get a sense for like what it actually is. But Ace Combat 4 builds out the world quite well, particularly the kingdom principality of Erusia, which I believe is a kingdom for most of the time. Eventually you'll have a republic. You'll have ISAF, which is a lot of the Yuzian continent forces together. You'll have North Point, which actually really isn't made its own thing until Ace Combat 5, believe it or not. But you will fight with the allied forces against the kingdom of Erusia and their quest to dominate the continent of Usia. It's an absolutely fun thing, and you would think that this war was actually pretty goddamn huge because it's on its own continent. But it's actually about the size of Australia. And when you play this, you get a really good sense in Ace Combat 4 that... Excuse me, all my things are screwed up. You get a really good sense for what this game is. But all of a sudden is that you get into some stuff that is quite different, quite bigger. And that really comes into Ace Combat 5, is that Usia seems really big until you realize it isn't. However, let's put this into perspective. Ace Combat 4, wonderful. Absolutely, if you get the chance to play it, definitely play it. It's good times had. Let's get into the world when it really gets big. Released, excuse me, my things are a little goofy here. That is the wrong button. Let's try this, shall we? I am having a wonderful day here. Let's try that. All right, so cool. Released in 2004. I'll get you the dates in just a second here. October 21st of 2004. October 25th for North America, and February 18th of 2005 for the EU is the release of the Unsung War, excuse me, Ace Combat 5, the Unsung War, otherwise known as Ace Combat Squadron Leader in Europe. This game is absolutely fantastic. It is largely known as the creme de la creme of the Ace Combat series, largely because of the story, not so much of the gameplay. Ace Combat 4 and Ace Combat 0, which will be coming up next, actually do the gameplay a little bit better justice because they revamped how the special weapons worked, and it was each plane had its own special weapons and not something that you could tag and drop. And that's one of the big things that a lot of people got let down on. But it did trade out for giving you squadron commands, is that you instead of being a soulless pilot who was largely in charge of himself, is that you got command of a squadron, you and 3 other people, that you would fly around your own plane, but you could give small commands to people to be like, hey, go on the attack, hey, cover me, do whatever, and it really enhanced the game for a lot of people. Also, you had a massive expansion of the dialogue box, which was a lot of exposition as far as what's going on in the game is provided, particularly in Ace Combat 4, through the radio and through the chatter. Hey, this is going on. Hey, there's banter and all this other stuff going on between the pilots. That was done a little bit in Ace Combat 4, but it's brought full tilt into Ace Combat 5. Each of your wingmen is a particular character, and there is a point, which I will get to in the spoilers here, but there is a point where it will literally make people very emotional in Ace Combat 5. But let's get into the story real quick. We'll kind of do this. Gameplay is fantastic, absolutely wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it, was very, very happy with it. And it's basically kind of the cult classic for the Ace Combat series and for the Ace Combat fandom. The story is this. You are in the... You are in... I need to pull this thing up just again. I got a fly in my face, which sucks. You are in Osea. You are a member of the War Dog Squadron of the Osean Federation, and what you do is that you basically get in the middle of a massive war between Osea and Utobania. These are basically the superpowers of their era, and technically they've been at peace for the last 15 years. But what is... Oh, excuse me. I am losing my mind. I just moved all my buttons around earlier, and I'm still getting used to that. I apologize. I'm going to fix that later. Osea and Utobania are the superpowers of their world, but during the events of what will be Ace Combat 0, is that they basically kind of end their Cold War and they put their hostilities aside. However, because of certain things going on, is that they're forced into a major geopolitical confrontation within their world, and the two superpowers are at each other's throats, and you are the front line of defense. You are literally on a little teeny island off the coast of Osea, right between you and Utobania, and your story is largely being the frontline defenders. Because you are the frontline defenders, you rack up a lot of combat experience. And as being part of the combat experience, veterans, is that eventually you become some of the most well-known fighter pilots within the Osean Federation and the world as a whole. And what kind of really boils out here is a very long story, but I'm going to suffice it to say we're going to do this. Starts out, you're a rookie. You're a trainee, you don't know crap, and you're along with an entire flight of rookies on yourself. You've got a hard-as-nails trainer that's going about you for the first mission or two. Actually, I think it's the first 3 missions, but I could be wrong here. We'll go over that here in just a second. His name is Captain Bartlett, and he is an absolutely wonderful character. Everyone loves this character. I can't remember who voices him, but he's a very well-known voice actor here in North America that did a lot of Tom Clancy work. But you will find his voice very familiar and very endearing. And going into this is that he's just one of those tough as nails. Lost the love a long time ago, and this is the only thing he has left is training pilots and being a fighter pilot, and he loves it. Anyway, so he's training you guys, and first mission that you guys go on, in the prologue, what happens is that your training flight is ambushed by a group of interceptors, which you don't know who it is. Turns out it'll be Utobania. Steve Bum, that's who. Thank you very much. Appreciated that. Anyway, so what happens is that in the prologue, your flight is ambushed, and most of the trainees are killed because the control room, quote-unquote, misplaced some zeros. Anyway, long story short, it's you and a couple other people that are still left. You go on your first mission where you're on war alert, but you're still technically in training. But that's neither here nor there. You're scrambled on your first sortie, and you go after an SR-71 who is doing reconnaissance, and eventually you get ambushed by the people that come to save the SR-71. And at first you're told not to engage, but Captain Bartlett, being endearing and awesome as he is, tells you, hey, screw it, start firing, shut up and start shooting, and you're kind of off the races. And that first mission kind of takes off for you. This second mission, I can't remember. I'm not going to go down every mission, don't worry. The second mission is, if I remember right, you're kind of running out on some recon planes, and Captain Bartlett is shot down. You have to basically go about and do things the way that you need to do. You go out, you guys are doing really good. It's at the very end of the mission, after you shot down a bunch of reconnaissance drones, that there is a missile that comes off of the landing boat for the drones, and it shoots down Captain Bartlett. He punches out, and they're supposed to have the search and rescue teams go deploy for him. You guys go back to base. Problem. Captain Bartlett's never recovered. And for a minute, he's kind of assumed dead, or more actually appropriately, is that he's kind of later on assumed to be a spy. Gets into very interesting details. We'll get there. But at least for where we're at right now is that it is absolutely some really, really good times to be had, because now Mission 3, it's supposed to be the most senior, which is the former wingman, Edge, which is will eventually be Captain Nagase. She's, I believe, a lieutenant at this point. And so Lieutenant Nagase is supposed to be the squadron leader, but she hands it off to you because she's a little bit shaken. Says, hey, look, Blaze, which is your call sign, which you are still a nameless protagonist, becomes the squadron leader. So she's your wingman, and you're backed up by Lieutenant, which will be later Captain Davenport, which is the rock and roll guy. So let's line out our first couple of characters here. You had Bartlett, who was training you. He, unfortunately, is gone for most of the game. We'll come back later. You have yourself, which is, you are call sign Blaze, and you can be whoever you want to be, that kind of thing. And then you have your wingman. You have your wingman, who is Lieutenant Nagase, who is, she is, how do I describe her? She's very lax. Unfortunately, this game is made in Asia, and so she's not really portrayed as a very outstanding character. Basically, sexism in Asia argument. I'm going to go out here. She's not really flushed out as an amazing character with her own personality traits. Now, she does get a few things here and there that are kind of a wonderful thing, but she's very quiet. What eventually you do realize is that she does get a little exposition that. She knows a little bit of mythology from her grandmother, and you become the Great Rosgri Squadron. That is kind of the mantle of the game. We'll get into that as we go on. But yeah, she's not coward. She's not meek. She actually gets really. Excuse me. Thank you for helping me out, Sharon. Appreciate that in the chat. She gets really tough as nails later on. But we'll table that later. Next is my favorite character of my favorite character of the game, and that is Lieutenant Davenport, which will eventually be, you guys will get promoted as you go on. And he's the rock and roll guy, dude. He's not really a hippie, but he is Chopper, as his alias is, or his call sign is. He goes about flying around and has all kinds of wonderful things going on with him, where he's just the rock and roll dude, and I love it. I love his character, especially a couple of episodes on, or a couple of missions down the line, is that you guys are air rated. And he's sitting there, and he's like, man, I'm listening to this music, and it's actually Blurry by Puddle of Mud playing. And he's just like, yep, I'm going to sleep all the night, and the air raid goes off, and he's just like, oh man, you've got to be kidding me. I loved this character. And we'll get to him later, because he has some major plot points coming up. But at least at where we are, and how that I interpret everything going on, is that you start out with those, go into mission 3, the war has been declared, everything breaks loose, and one of your major night reports, which is important to say, Hewlett in this world is under attack. And you're going into the thick of the action, and you're the head of this new squadron who is barely out of basically out of pilot training, and you're kind of the tip of the spear. And you'll have some people kind of come along and help you. Basically, at the very beginning, is that they provide you a sense of urgency. Is that there's an emergency in-flight briefing because you're more ordered to scramble at the beginning of the prologue mission briefing of this. And then they'll actually give you an in-flight briefing. It's like, hey, they're getting bombed. Go intercept the enemies, and you're kind of talking with Edge and Chopper about who's going to lead the squadron, and then you get introduced to a character that will be prevalent towards the end of the game, Swordsman, or Captain Snow, which is a fighter pilot in F-14 Tomcat who flies off the U.S. or the carrier Kestrel. He'll be very noticeable later, but he has a voiceover. I can't remember who his voice actor is, but you'll remember him quite well. He shows up. Basically gives you a little bit of crap, and though he engages, and you'll actually hear him quite a bit in the radio chatter during that whole mission. We're gonna skip ahead a couple missions. I don't have to get into every single one of them, but what eventually happens is that very quickly you build up quite a bit of combat experience, and it's largely implied through the narrative of the story is that you are becoming pretty much one of the crack aces squadrons of the war, and that's largely because one, you haven't died yet, and two, you've experienced quite a lot of combat because you're kind of just thrust into it over and over and over again. And so you guys become, you start rapidly getting promoted, you start rapidly gaining expertise, and to the point where they actually, by mission 6, they're technically, like 6 or 7, they're actually having you pick up new flight trainees to train them how to operate. Unfortunately, that doesn't last very long, as most of them get wiped out by an amazing super weapon from Utopania. And all hell breaks loose as you have to figure out how they are launching burst missiles that are not nuclear powered, but have basically steel rain burst missiles. A very interesting concept. We don't know how it necessarily works IRL, but as the general level is that everything is going to crap. The stakes keep getting raised higher and higher, and you have to go hunt down a submarine in a jet. It's going to be interesting. So the counterattack begins, and what OSEA does is that they have an orbital not SSTO. They have an orbital aircraft that basically kind of functions as a super space shuttle. There's a lot to go into that, but what they basically do is they turn it into a laser-powered orbital bomber, and it's fantastic. And eventually, what they use is they use this as the counterattack against Utopania. You have to help them put the laser into space by protecting the flight assembly area, and then they use that to actually shoot the submarine. It's hilarious. It's actually a lot more believable than what it sounds. Is that you can see this thing come down from orbit and strike the ocean, and then you see the submarine that you have to kill emergency blow. And it's ridiculous as it may sound. It's actually a lot more believable in game than it actually sounds. And there's quite a lot going on here. But basically, and a long story short, is that the Syntaxi, as it is called, is destroyed by the help of the Arcbird and yourself, working together and Arcbird's the orbital bomber. You guys work together and take it down. But unfortunately, not too long after that, the Arcbird suddenly loses its power to use its laser weapon. Dun, dun, dun. And so the stage is reset, and it goes back to a conventional war. Eventually, because of your efforts, Osea starts getting the upper hand. They invade Tyberius and they start making their way up to the capital of Centigrad. They get all the way up to Karuk Fortress, which is this fortress randomly in the middle of the damn country. And you guys are kicking ass, taking names, and all of a sudden, everything goes to hell. And if you didn't think it already went to hell already, you are wrong. You are oh so wrong. Because all of a sudden, your allies are hunting you. At first, it's the 8492nd Squadron, who is really, really weird because they're supposed to escort you home, and then all of a sudden they start engaging you, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. Then you finally make it all the way back home so you can refuel, requip, and, basically have some semblance of peace, when you are suddenly ambushed by the base commander, who is instigating that Captain Bartlett was a traitor, and so are you, that you're a bunch of spies, which makes absolutely no sense at all, and this is the only major plot point I have a problem with, is that somehow the war heroes that are kicking ass and taking names are openly believed to be aiding and abetting the enemy. Okay, but it makes more sense than what you think it would be, because what has happened is that the 8492nd Squadron is actually an aggressor squadron that has been sent over to the Osean Air Force from the Principality of Belka. Why does Belka matter? Because 15 years ago, when Tyberius and Osea made peace, the reason they did is they were fighting the Balkans together. They basically launched it, kind of the Germany's World War II event in this world back in 1995. And so basically, yeah, all hell breaks loose, things are getting engaged, things are happening, and what has happened that makes everything go crazy is that a lot of Belkan officers and a lot of people, when South Belka was annexed by Osea, were able to infiltrate into Osea and become part of the command structure, become part of the task force that operates within the military and within the government. And so they're able to more or less pull a soft coup within the country. And this world gets really big really quick, where you're realizing that it's not just a handy-down game where you're just the pilots and, trying to fend off, a global geopolitical struggle. Now you're understanding how the pieces all fit together, and how there was an escort mission that you had all the way back in Mission 6 that secretly was carrying the president of the Osean Federation. Turns out he was captured by the 8492nd Squadron and was basically thrown into hiding by the Belkans so they could put up the vice president, which was a warhawk. Anyway, they somehow are able to pull off, to some degree, the same thing in Tyberius, and their whole idea is literally the Sum of All Fears plot from Tom Clancy. Get the two biggest powers in the world to fight each other, knock each other down, so that Belka can rise again. And for a while, it really works. Anyway, what happens is you escape from your own airbase and trainer aircraft. You're not able to get your own, and you find out that the mechanic that you were helping with was one of these people that actually came over from Belka. However, he was not one of the people that's part of the infiltrator group. He and Captain Bartlett were friends. What had happened is in the last war, Pops, the mechanic, was ordered to drop a nuclear weapon on his own country. And just a little bit of black story, which we'll get in Ace Combat 0, is that 7 nuclear weapons are dropped in Belka to stop the Allied forces from entering what is Belka proper, or Nord Belka, what have you. Anyway, we'll table that part before we get to 0. But Pobbs was one of the ace pilots that was actually assigned to drop the nuclear weapon, and he defected. What ended up happening was that Bartlett vouched that he was actually an Osean. Even though he had no identification and no papers or any of that kind of thing, he vouched that he was on the right side, got him on there, wonderful thing. And by the way, that instance you can actually play in one of the things of Ace Combat 0, and we'll get to that. Anyway, so Pops defects, and turns out he actually knows most of the people that are part of the 8492nd Squadron, because you can hear that in the voice chatter. He trained half of them. It's amazing. Wraps all of this nice and tight little bow. Bartlett, by the way, is full-blooded, or not full-blooded Osean, but he's a full Osean citizen. Anyway, so you find out Pops is this basically legendary war hero from ages long past. Shows you he's got some mad skills still, even though he's kind of not in the shape for it. And you eventually find your way to the aircraft carrier Kestrel, who gives you refuge. And to make a long story short about what's going on here in this story is that Basically, to some degree, the Osean military is so big that it can't keep track of everything that's going on, and there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief here, but largely what you kind of implied is that the infiltrators don't have full control of the Osean military. They have part. And so they're able to corner certain people, but if you get certain people to go away, or more likely you act like you're dead, which is kind of what happens, is that people leave you alone. The surviving crew of the Kestrel pick you up because they've largely been deplaned, and the carrier, for some reason, is not a high priority for reinforcement. I don't understand that, but I guess plot point must prevail, and the story must go on. Anyway, so what happens is you team up with Captain Snow, and I do apologize, I've skipped over a few things. You had a 3-man squadron for quite a bit there. During the air raid mission, which is like mission 5 or 6, you gain your 4th one, which is Archer, which is Grim, Archer, whatever his name is. I can't remember, but he's a young dude. He's basically in pilot training. He's one of the few people to survive. He joins the squadron, kicks ass, takes names, becomes part of the crew. About midway through the game, about maybe 2/3, you guys are put on a ceremonial flight because you are the creme de la creme of the Osean Air Force. And you are sent over to fly over a stadium, and it's one of the coolest things you get to do in the game, to do basically a ceremonial flight. Everything goes to hell, you get ambushed, and when it comes down to it, Captain Davenport tragically dies. You actually have one of your wingmen shot down, and it's very emotional. I cried when I played this game. I 100% did, I will admit it. It was very emotional for me personally, and going forward into this is that it got even crazier because, like, it still makes me well up, replaying it on, like, emulator on PS4. It's a really good game. It's a really good story, and you will love. I love the character. It was great, and to see Captain Davenport pass away in game still actually makes me quite emotional about it because it was a wonderful storyline. Anyway, he is kind of replaced in his position by Captain Snow later on, and so you will have the final 4, if you will, being yourself, Edge, Snow or Swordsman, and then Archer. And you guys will be going about doing your thing, kicking ass, taking names. What happens is that once the War Dog Squadron, which is originally who you were, is presumed dead or missing in action, you rebrand yourself. You rebrand yourself. You are the Rosgrease Squadron. And what Rosgrease is explained by Nagase, is that it is the story of this world, is that basically every now and again a demon comes out, and if you will, there's kind of an emphasis on this that they don't really translate over very well. Rosgrease is change. Rosgrease is the differences that comes about whenever a great schism comes out in the real world. Great change comes along. At first, it's a demon. It destroys everything. It makes everything uncomfortable. It's painful and annoying. But as the legend goes, Rosgrease will die, and when Rosgrease returns as a hero. The change is complete. The world is made better from the lessons learned. And you become the Rosgrease Squadron is actually the motif here, is that you become basically the agents of change, which that's not really implied. You have to read between the lines on that. But you do take over the lineage there. So anyway, to wrap this all up, what eventually happens is that you start figuring out what's going on through the help of the Kestrel crew and an intelligence gathering vessel called the Andromeda, where you start figuring out what's going on. The Belkans have infiltrated most of the Osean military and command structure. You figure out that Captain Bartlett is still alive and he's trying to bust out Prime Minister Nicanor of Yuktobania. Meanwhile, you have to go on your own mission to rescue President Harling of the Osean Federation, and basically get the leaders back in charge that are actually believe in peace and prosperity, and defeating the Belkans by doing all this stuff. And by the way, the Artbird sabotage was done by the Belkans because they didn't want Osea getting too strong. And one of the numerous things that actually happens during this war is that eventually your squadron is such a threat that they actually try to kill you multiple times because you are winning the war for Osea. And literally, the moment that you disappear officially from the Osean roster, the war bogs down in the middle of Yuktobania. So that kind of gives you credit for what's going on. Anyway, eventually what happens is you bust everybody out, you figure out the full thing. Belka did it, which is actually quite a big meme throughout the Ace Combat community. But Belka did it. We're dealing with, we're dealing with a world that has gone to hell, instigated by a lot of bad actors, and you have to kind of not purge them, but you have to go out and you have to stop them. You go after Gruner Industries, which was funding a lot of their operations, and it's it kind of goes over the top where. Basically, once Belka realizes the jig is up, it's technically not Belka's fault because these are a secret cabal called the Gray Men that you're actually trying to stop, and they're leaders of political and corporate unions that are pro South Belka returning to Belka, and eventually what they have control of is these mega weapons and shit that will eventually destroy most of the major cities within Yuktobania or Ozia. Because if you can't beat them from the inside, just nuke everybody to death and, make it to where they can't help anything. And so, that's kind of Ace Combat 5. It slowly ratchets up. It gets really, really good. It gets really, really big. And all the things are at stake where literally nuclear weapons are being threatened to be launched at either of Yuktobania or Ozia. And you are in charge of stopping all the evildoers. It gets a little preachy there towards the end, but it does a lot of work for itself. And it's actually a very wonderful game. Wonderful stories all around. The characters are great. Swordsman's one of the cooler characters towards the end of the game. Unfortunately, you don't really get a lot of his personal backstory, which is unfortunate, but he's quite a badass, and he's quite fun to listen to in the video chat, or in the radio chatter. So, wrapping Ace Combat 5, it's the center of the era there, and I've spent quite a lot of time on that, but there's a reason. So we're going to jump up to the next one, which, getting over here, is Ace Combat 0, which is basically the prequel to Ace Combat. Excuse me, I am losing my mind. Ace Combat 0 was released in 2006. It's basically the prequel to Ace Combat 5, which is the Belkan War. Ace Combat 0, the Belkan War. Is literally what it's called. And you are a mercenary pilot fighting for a small country called Ustio, who is trying to fight off the Belkans. And some of the plot points that are in Ace Combat 5 do show their face. You actually, as one mission, and you have to meet some qualifiers to get there, can actually shoot down Pops, who is defecting, and the mercenaries that are sent after him to kill him. It's actually quite interesting. But yeah, you'll see Captain Jack Bartlett as Heartbreak 1 on the screen, flying around in his particular jet. You'll see Pops flying around in his MiG-21 fish bed, believe it or not. They're all flying around. It's a wonderful game in itself, and it's got its own story. It's not our own squadron. It's just you and one dude, your wingman, which is Solo Wing Pixie. And he has a wonderful story. Surprise, surprise. Long story short, you'll actually fight him as the final boss. What tends to happen is that you both were mercenaries. You are largely there to help the Allied forces defeat Belka. But a lot of the mercenaries that are employed during this war end up defecting to a shadow organization called the World with No Boundaries, which basically is an organization of a bunch of anarchists that want to basically end the wars in a nutshell. And so you have Ozian and Yuktobanian and Belkan and all these other peoples get together who were just former enemies in a common cause of ending the world with boundaries and borders. And they kind of do the whole we're going to end the world kind of thing if they won't join us there towards the end. And Larry Folk, which is Solo Wing Pixie, is the final boss. It's quite a fun time. It's quite a wonderful game. Gets a little over the top, a little too much here. True, anarchists again. Anyway, it gets a little bit over the top towards the end of the game, and this is kind of where we start seeing Ace Combat kind of losing it a little bit. Is that 0 kind of pushes it a little too far. We're out of believability. The entire first 2/3 is absolutely fantastic, all the way up until the nukes are done, and it's pretty good. And then all of a sudden, Larry just tries to shoot you down, doesn't work out very well, and then he defects, and you don't see him for a while. And the game kind of loses a lot of its touch after that. It does a really good job up until that point. The story's great, but then it's largely a personal struggle. Ooh, excuse me, I'm getting tired again. I'm sorry. I had a new air conditioner put in, and it's wreaking havoc on my body. I'm still trying to get all my settings straight, but it makes me very, very sleepy and very, very tired. To have basically central AC working in the way that it's supposed to. Anyway, what I'm getting at here is that the game's quite a lot of fun. You play as, what is it? It's not Pixie. Pixie's the other person. What is your call sign? The enemies call you the Demon Lord, and I love that. It's such a cool ass nickname for the protagonist. Is that the enemy pilots are so scared of you they literally call you the Demon Lord of the Round Table. And it has a lot of world building. It has a lot of good lore built around like an area called B7R, which is basically where all the Mac Daddy fighter pilots get together to have the biggest clashes in aerial warfare that the Strange Old World ever has. And you see the best of the best go at it. And you'll fight quite a few missions there, and it's a lot of fun, particularly the second time. And it has some of the best music going along with it too, as far as the orchestra. But anyway, yeah, the story kind of goes to crap, at least a little bit for me, but it's still pretty good. It just, it's a little too unbelievable even for the Strange World. And so, closing out with Ace Combat Zero, we really start closing out on the end of the golden age of Ace Combat. It kind of doesn't get any better after this, unfortunately. It really kind of tops out with Ace Combat 5. And we can talk about why a little bit more as we go. But one other mention that I need to put out is Ace Combat, or during 2006, is Ace Combat Skies of Deception. This is Ace Combat on the go. It's PSP, and it's basically Ace Combat, just a little bit leveled down for the PSP. It's absolutely a lot of fun. I played quite a bit of it. It's got a nice little story to it. Very Ace Combat-y. Not super over the top, but, you know, pretty well. And the only problem I have with this game is that it was so hard that even on easy mode, I couldn't beat it. The Fenrir is a little broken, not gonna lie. At the very end, yeah, the enemy planes are just a little busted. But all things good, all things there. You have that. Now 2007 rolls around, and you have the rise of Ace Combat 6 for the Fires of Liberation. And all of a sudden, everything is getting weird because it's not a PlayStation release; it's an Xbox release. Well, one of the primary reasons I actually switched over to Xbox 360. But yeah, we're on the next-gen console, and everything's taken off, and it's oh so good, but oh so bad all at the same time. Basically, as far as the gameplay is concerned, everything is amped up. You have more weapons, or excuse me, the one I don't. Ace Combat 6, everything graphically is so much better. It still looks pretty good even today, even now we're 2 gens away from what was going on here. But Ace Combat 6 was quite a lot of fun. The story kind of sucks. That's actually probably one of the big issue with this game, is that the gameplay's pretty good, and although a lot of people complain about the missile spam, where you can basically now have the access to tell all of your allied forces, hey, blow the living shit out of everything, which was awesome as hell, by the way, is that what ends up really happening here is that the story just is a little underwhelming. The world building's okay. They try, but they try a little too hard. But the characters that you're actually, your point of view is around is really uninteresting. They don't really focus on you at all. They focus on, it's kind of like a Godzilla movie. They focus on the characters around and the world that's going on. And so the emphasis isn't really on you. And the story suffers for it. It really does. It's not driven by your actions. It's just you're kind of tagged along for the ride. And so, yeah. No, you're talking about Ace Combat Zero, the Fires of Liberation. Anyway, yeah, it starts divorcing itself plot-wise from Ace Combat in a way that doesn't work out very well, and that's unfortunate. But as far as the Godzilla movies are not about the story; it's about the monster fights. I disagree, but we'll do that later. Anyway, the whole kind of thing here is that Ace Combat 6, as far as gameplay, is the best to date. Some people bitch about it. I disagree with them. It's absolutely quite good. It's just the story is kind of garbage, and actually kind of the sales are pretty low for this. It doesn't do that well. The ratings aren't the best in the world, and it kind of puts Ace Combat on hold to some degree. We're going to get into that going further ahead. Basically, 2008, it's on hiatus. 2009, you'll have Skies of Incursion, which is a prequel to Skies of Deception. This is on the PSP again. I didn't play this one. I heard it was okay. So I won't touch that too much. You have Ace Combat Joint Assault and Assault Horizon Trigger Finger. I don't know much about those at all. Let me make sure that I know what joint assault even is before I kill it. It was on the PSP. I don't know much about it. Okay. Anyway. So the next one. This one is the infamous one, but I think it's a little bit undeserved. Ace Combat Assault Horizon, it released in 2011, is a massive, massive departure from the Ace Combat series. And basically, it was an experiment. A lot of people didn't like the experiment, and that's fine. Excuse me. Anyway, a lot of people didn't particularly like Ace Combat Assault Horizon. I understand. Mechanically, it was a massive departure. Storyline, it was a massive departure. I think it had a lot more good than it had bad. I think the soundtrack was still pretty good. Not up to former Ace Combat standards, but it was still pretty good. The story wasn't bad. The big thing that really upset a lot of people is that the story moved from Strange World to the real world, but on a large degree, it was totally believable. There was nothing about the story that really made me go, oh crap, this is bullshit. Absolutely wouldn't work. Basically, you have a bunch of disaffected Russians who are kind of become their own terrorist organization, and they're excuse me, Assault Horizon has real world stuff. The antagonists are a bunch of Russians who are very upset with the way that things have been going on in geopolitical affairs in the world, and they're basically wanting to give the Americans what for and cause chaos and instability across everything that's going on. And your job as the American Air Force is to stop them. It's quite fun, and you actually get wonderful assets, and it's quite a beautiful game in the way it looks. The story's not bad. A lot of people kind of trash on the story. It's a little bit over the top, especially towards the end, but it's not too it's not too bad at all. Russian Revolution 2 is kind of the whole thing there. Anyway, but I don't think they were communists. They were kind of weird. Anyway, what eventually happens is that the reason why Ace Combat Assault Horizon is not beloved is that it introduced a new mechanic. It was called dogfight mode. And it took away a lot of the controls for what you can do. And it basically just puts you in a tunnel vision where the enemy aircraft is in front of you or behind you, and you have to either maneuver, hit a button, hit a combo button to get the airplane in front of you, or, eventually you get shot down. But you do that, and you basically are just holding on the gun button and the missile button until the guy in front of you is dead. And a lot of people didn't like that. It was supposed to be based on the principle of what they called still carnage, where you got up close and personal and everything went to shit. And you could see like all the oil and the machine parts go flying around, and it was crazy. However, on the other side of that, it added a few things that a lot of people were both upset with and happy with. There is one mission where you basically get to do the whole Call of Duty hanging outside of a helicopter and spraying everything down with what is it, an M61 chain gun? Can't remember exactly what it is. But there's a mission where you get to do that. There's another mission where you get to fly around in an Apache and you get to go shoot everything up, which was cool because we never got to fly a helicopter. But a lot of that didn't really jive too well with a lot of people for Ace Combat. The one that did, and that Sherm is getting into, Sherm is really getting into. Oh yeah, there was an AC-130 mission in there too. There's an AC-130 mission in there. Literally just brings back the Call of Duty memes as well. A lot of people didn't care for that. They were just like, hey, look, we can do this in Call of Duty. Why are you trying to be like Call of Duty? Literally, that was a lot of the argument, and they're true. The one that actually is the bomber mission, which is that instead of just flying a fighter or like a heavy fighter, you got to fly a B-2 freaking bomber and lighten shit up, and it was cool. It was the first time in Ace Combat that you got to do that, and that will be done again in another installment because it was cool. And so yeah, flying the B-2 was cool. Was very fun. And I apologize that I'm what about the ground strike? That's what I'm thinking of. I like, flying the B-2. Flying the B-2 was great. I don't know what you're talking about if that's not what you're talking about. Anyway, but yeah, a lot of the extra stuff was quite different, and the dogfight mode, there was just certain times where you have to engage with it. You can't just fly without it, particularly in the final bosses, and it's not It's the DFM for Ground Strike. I have no idea what you're talking about. But anyway, yeah, the problem is, like, just flying the Apache around just doesn't give a lot of people a lot of love for what they were doing. The AC-130 just reminded too many people of Call of Duty. And going ahead of that is, the only real big thing that they really added that a lot of people did like was the bomber mission. Can you drive me into Volskal? No, I cannot. Anyway, so to wrap this all up, god damn, I'm getting tired. I apologize. To wrap this all up, Ace Combat Assault Horizon, I think, is actually more deserving than a lot of people give it credit for. The story is pretty good. It does add quite a bit, and they experiment. There's a reason it's not Ace Combat 7 Assault Horizon. It's Ace Combat Assault Horizon. Is that it's an experiment, and unfortunately, it loses a lot of people in the wrong way, and that's unfortunate, but they should have had a backup plan and be like, hey, cool, this might underperform, it might highly perform. It turned out underperforming because it wasn't that good, and it wasn't what the community wanted, but I highly encourage them for taking risks. And so it was quite interesting. Anyway, the next one is that we're going to jump all the way to 2014 and the rise of Ace Combat Infinity, and this one has a checkered opinion quite a lot. It has a very limited story, and it's basically a free-to-play MMO where you can go out and you just go shoot down other people. The cool thing is that you have almost every aircraft that you could possibly imagine you can fly within the Ace Combat community. You can fly B-2s, you can fly these giant bombers. You can fly pretty much anything. It was, excuse me. The problem with this game is that it was absolutely a free-to-play, not free-to-play. It was like a pay-to-play cash grab game. And that really set a lot of people the wrong way. But if you actually had any kind of money to pay for it and actually could play for the game, because you had to pay for fuel and literal money, or at least to get started, is that once you did get started and going out and playing, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I got my ass kicked, don't get me wrong, but it was basically an open MMO where you could play within the Ace Combat world, and almost any game or any fighter that had ever been in the game was, or in the series was in it. You had access to just about anything and everything, upgrades, customization, the whole 9 yards. It was basically the pilot's dream kit. The only problem is that you had to pay money for it, and a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people wanted that one-time installment. You're good to go. That didn't have that on this one, and so it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It was open for 4 years, and the servers were shut down in early 2018 because it wasn't making a lot of money, and it just really wasn't very popular with the community. So you'll notice that there's quite a lot of breakup here, where yeah, you'll notice where there's quite a lot of breakup here, where you have releases quite literally almost every 2 years, and then all of a sudden it just starts getting bigger and bigger. So from 2014 all the way up until 2019, we don't have shit. We have all the way in 2019, we finally have Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown. And this is the newest release. A lot of people, it has some more positive reviews than a lot of the other games that we've seen in the last 10 years. I don't like this game. And this is where I actually go against the grain quite a bit when it comes to a lot of people. The Ace Combat community is quite divided on this one. Some people think it's a great game. Some people think it's a good game. Mechanically, it's solid. It's beautiful. It's graphically beautiful. Works great on the PS4 and the like a lot of the cross-platform that it has. Looks amazing on PC if you get a chance to look at it. I'm sorry, I am choking up. Anyway, what's going on here is that Ace Combat 7 is mechanically really questionable. Flying the plane is better than it's ever been. You get all kinds of access to basically some crazy vertical stunts. Some of it breaks the in-game immersion a little bit. You see, like, the one plane that everyone bitches about is the F-18 somehow can do post-stall maneuvers, which makes no sense. Because it doesn't have thrust vectoring. But most of the other planes that have thrust vectoring can do that kind of thing, where they can pull a Cobra, and drop down, or they can, do a lot of somersaults that you can only do with, like, Generation 4 Plus and 5 aircraft. That's fun, but for some reason the F-18 Hornet can do that. Don't know why. Anyway, excuse me, I'm getting a lot of phlegm. Anyway, to finish this out, the problem with Ace Combat 7 is that mechanically it's actually one of the worst ones for me, because the special weapons got fucked up. Now we're largely in hand with the fact that you can choose what your special weapons are, but the problem is that there's a lot of special weapons that are usually what you wouldn't find in game, or you would only find in the super planes. Example: the F-15C has access to fucking particle lasers. Why does the F-15C have access to aerial particle lasers? I don't know. It makes no sense. It completely breaks the immersion for me. The F-15E has the access to a burn laser, which literally, the difference between like the particle lasers are, they're basically laser bullets that just go pew, 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 pew. And so you have laser weapons on an aircraft that's built in 1970. Upgrades or not, you would never do this. Okay, whatever. Anyway, some of the special weapons are completely jacked and gimped and look like shit. As an example, for like the F-14 Tomcat, wonderful plane, love flying it. The XLAA, which are basically they're AMRAAMs, they're AIM-120 AMRAAMs here in the United States, is that instead of loading the under canopy up with like 6 of the things like you had in Ace Combat 6, instead of having, basically what happened is Ace Combat 4, 5, and 0, if you had XLAAs, long-range air-to-air missiles, is that you would get 4 of them under your plane, and you can multi-lock 4 planes. In Ace Combat 6, you could do 6, because you had more processing power and it could handle the extra missiles. In Ace Combat 7, they wanted to go the extra mile, they wanted to add 8. Cool, no problem. Just bolt them on the underside of the canopy, or not the underside of the canopy, on the weapons hard points or underneath the aircraft body, so that you can go to town. Nope, they give you fucking weapons pods. Yes, fucking weapons pods. And if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's literally these giant pods that are stuck on the weapons hard points that carry 4 missiles in each one of them. It's uglier than fucking sin. It's not believable as hell. It's, oh my god, I hate this. The entire special weapons suite through most of this game was fucked up beyond all recognition. You have weapons that shouldn't be on planes of their era at all. And when you do have weapons on these planes, a lot of them are dumb and ugly. What they should have done, and you still only get 3. Or at least for most of them, you only get 3 choices between 3. What you should have had is what freaking Project Wingman at the exact same time did. You get all the special weapons, except you're hard limited because of the hard points, and you can choose and drag and drop depending on what you want to put on the hard points. So if you have an X or F-15E, as an example, that is capable of both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions, you can choose. All right, this hard point and this hard point, I'm going to put an XLAA on. This hard point is going to get your standard missile, and I'm going to load this bitch out with bombs because it's going to be an air-to-ground mission for most of it. No, they didn't do that. Literally a indie game made by Ace Combat fans at the same time did it fucking better. Well done, Project Aces. You fucked it up. And what's worse is that they made it extra complicated into getting all of your stuff in Ace Combat 7, because now it's locked behind a progression wall. You can't just save up your money to buy the specific plane that you want and the specific I got missiles strapped to my missiles, bro. Almost, that is kind of like where you were at. But anyway, no longer could you go down the normal progression of, hey, get enough money, buy the plane you want, buy the special weapon you want for it. Now it's progress walled. And so you have to go down a development fucking tech tree to get what you want. Now, the reason why they did this is that how hard is it to play without flight stick and a yoke? Controller. Use the damn controller. Anyway, what I'm getting at here is that what they did allow you to do for the first time is that you could upgrade your stuff. And so you could upgrade your weapons, you could upgrade your avionics, you could upgrade all these things to allow you to do some extra stuff, would make your plane more maneuverable, make it faster, make your weapons more damaging, longer range, faster reload, all of that. Yeah, that was cool, and it was a nice thing, but they had to put it in a tech tree, and they put a tech tree in, so you would buy those instead of all on the way through, instead of just buying the next plane that you wanted. Project Aces, fuck you. Terrible fucking decision. I love the customization. That was cool, but the way that you implemented it was absolute trash and dog shit. All right, and I haven't even got to the big creme de la creme here. And by the way, yeah, flight sticks in Ace Combat, you can do it. Don't do it. Just fly the damn controller. It works. Anyway, what's the big problem with Ace Combat 7? The story is garbage. Not only is it literally another Belka did it, but it's done in the worst way possibly imaginable. The story makes absolutely zero fucking sense starting Mission 3. And, yeah, it's absolutely just, it's a nightmare. The only good about this game, soundtrack's still pretty solid. The sound design's great. Most of the game mechanics that have been added are still actually more of an improvement. You can get struck by lightning. Flying through clouds is now makes your aircraft unstable, which I don't remember if that was Infinity or not. We'll table that. The flares that were originally introduced in Infinity are back, and that was really nice because you never had flares in the game all the way up until the fucking Gen 4 PS4s. Thank you, Project Aces. You did something right there. But, I mean, a lot of the shit was still gimped or fucked up, particularly in the special weapons, particularly in the tech tree, and it makes very bad. Assault Horizon had flares too. Yes, you are correct. I forgot about that. It did have flares. That was actually one of the big pros of Ace Combat Assault Horizon. Anyway, moving forward, but horribly implemented controls. True. Okay. The story. I am going to need a water. Holy crap. The story is absolutely garbage. What happens is that you start out, you don't even really get a chance to really recognize who the people you're on, or who the people of your community is. You are sent on first mission, go do an intercept. Second mission, you're sent to do something. I can't remember. Second mission, you're doing some kind of like ground bombing mission. Third mission's like an intercept. The fourth mission is you gotta go, somehow you are implied to still be kind of a rookie, and you're flying around in this area that's supposed to be like an ace level mission. For some reason, you're in charge of doing it, where you have to go rescue the president, which is he's not president anymore, but former President Harling. Anyway, make a long story short, is that you go about trying to rescue him. All hell breaks loose. There's a massive aerial dogfight, and the president's shot down. But wait, you're blamed for it. You're responsible because somehow you, it appears, are the one who shot him down, which makes no sense. It's not believable at all. And even if it was, it would be a horrible, horrible friendly fire incident. But you're thrown into a penal colony. But not only are you thrown into a fucking penal colony, but you're thrown into a penal Air Force detachment that is still given planes. That is not believable in any way, shape, or form. Fuck off with this. Yes, literally, Goldar. We need to rescue the president. Let's send a guy who's literally on his fourth mission to go in to rescue the president. Okay, I'm about to stroke. Anyway, so all hell breaks loose, and by the time you had just started to learn who some of these people were that you were flying with, you're taken out from them. You're put into a whole new group of people who are a bunch of jackasses. It was him or the janitor. Yeah, that whole new bunch of convict jackasses that you have to fly with the rest of the game. And the story's not believable. You're never giving people who are actually, in the penal system, fucking aircraft to fly. That's never going to happen, right? True. True. I will give you that. The penal colony characters have better personalities than 80% of the characters in the rest of the game. True. There is a lot of focus on those characters. A lot of people like Count. He's not bad. He's basically like Chad Coker's Nickelback, or Nickelback's Chad Coker, in terms of looks. He's kind of got like a little bit of a kind of leave it to Beaver attitude, where he's just like, "Hey man, let's go get it." He's kind of like a crazed out hippie. Tabloid, pretty solid. He's an anarchist. He's fun. Anyway, what eventually happens is that somehow you are redeemed. You basically become the ace pilot all over again, right? And because of your actions, you are kind of taken out of the doghouse, and then you're able to prove your innocence that you weren't the one who shot down Harling and all this other shit. Everything walks off in the sunset. Ace so great. I hate the story. It's absolutely dog crap. You don't even have a consistent antagonist through all the time. None of the plot points make sense. The emotional and intellectual meaning that is tried to be implied through this story is absolutely fucking garbage and completely is not sold in any way that it makes any kind of logical or consistent fucking sense. And so I'm going to end off with this. Ace Combat 7 was, for me personally, a massive, crushing disappointment. And unfortunately, I have to end on that. So hopefully... Holy crap, about threw up in my mouth. Anyway, Ace Combat 8. Hoping it gets better. But if you want something better than the piece of trash that is Ace Combat 7, check out Project Wingman. It's absolutely fantastic fun. Story isn't as good as what some of the contemporary Ace Combat games are, but if you want a nice arcadey shooter, yeah. If you want a nice Ace Combat shooter, if you want basically the Ace Combat game made by Ace Combat fans, Project Wingman, go pick it up. It is available on PC. It is wonderful. Wait, do they actually have details of Ace Combat 8? I don't know. We have some trailers for the 2-year anniversary. Reveal Ace Combat 8 will launch sometime between 2021 and 2025. The game is synced weekly with Ace Combat 3 and feature unmanned fighters and manned fighters. Cool. So we get Ace Combat 3 over again. This might be interesting. Anyway, I have been Tyberius D with reviews for Tyberius D. Today is our first video game series. We have done the Ace Combat series where I have talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Ace Combat series. There's a few things that we left out here and there, but I don't really even consider the things that we left out Ace Combat games. And so moving forward, I hope you guys have a wonderful time. I thank you all for being here in the chat and being a part of it. And come check us out on the Max Golf Podcast, which will be starting real soon. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.